members that I'm calling from the 4 different districts have done superintendent searches. So I can add that to my list of questions. That was going to be part of my search, you know, for people that I know that are on boards.
So
I don't.
No, that's
But to that point, from a Public Meetings Act perspective, so say you do some homework and you've done these interviews with 4 people, your ability to share that with us,
I'm going to share it with Blair.
and then that's posted. Okay, so just to make sure that that's, you know, or, okay.
I'm not sharing it with you, do I?
No, I understand, but when we see it at the board briefing or whatever, I just want to make sure that it doesn't turn into, here's my, you know, so if just trying to make sure the process, and going to Amy's concern, you know, does it make sense to set aside a little bit of time at the next time we gather and say, hey, what are people learning about searches and how do we share that information? And then we can do, I'm just trying to make sure that dot and I's and cross the T's. So it's fine if we, so compile information and then send it to the compilation will be put at that superintendent search page. Okay, cool. I'm comfortable with that.
So at this time, I've heard there's not a formal request to have a meeting on the 15th. So we'll just leave it at that at this point. How's that sound?
Thank you, David, for adding. I appreciate it.
You know, before, because this is a question that I have for new business, I wanted to ask the board if you would like us to add under board reports and communications this regular item, superintendent search, so that every board meeting, we just have it sitting there and we can just have it ready to go, and if it's 2 seconds, whatever, but we can formally add it to the agenda. All right, let's do it.
That's a traditional old business kind of item that probably would make sense. Yes, great idea.
Great, all right, thank you. All right, so unless David has any other thoughts, we'll close
Thank you.
that topic and see if there's any others.
Director Hayes looks at me like, how long did you list this week?
1 and 3/4.
Yes, exactly. So I have 3 quick, I think we're just question, comment things, and then more of a substantive one. Someone had said something about, here's the handwritten citizen comments, and that it gets in the record. And I reflect that in our minutes, it's not in the minutes. Our minutes don't have, and minutes serve a whole bunch of purposes, and minutes can get real unwieldy depending upon how much or you have for agenda packets or whatever. And I think it is very much the norm in governments to not do the verbatim comments that someone has, or the transcript of the entire meeting, but just a summary that, you know, citizen X came and talked about, you know, water quality, whatever. And so I just don't know, it just came into my mind, so I want to just note it and how we think about that, and is there a place and how we want to have, from a transparency perspective, a repository of, especially for the people who give us something that they would like to be, you know, maybe just if you would like to give us written comments that would be posted as a part of our meeting. I see the superintendent looking to the secretary.
So any written comments that are submitted at a meeting we maintain in the larger file for that particular meeting. So they are archived and are available.
In paper form, but not on digital form online.
The digital form, all the comments would be archived to the extent that the videos of the meetings are posted online and maintained. So that's an ongoing record where you could dial up, somebody could dial up what comments were offered at any particular meeting.
Okay, so so that's a good point. I did not actually realize we had a physical book in some sense that keeps track of those items that are collected during meetings. Okay, so then for someone to know that would be there. Thank you. A question was raised via, I think it was in the board briefing, about outreaching to association leaders regarding the superintendent search. And so there's, I think, 10-ish. And how we want to do it, can we do that, or and that's been requested either individually or in pairs. How should we do that in an efficient and effective way in the coordination of that? So it would seem that doing those meetings, I think the board wants to listen as much to the community as we can, and then trying to be efficient with everyone's time. You know, we can do that in pairs, we couldn't do that as a threesome, 3 board members, but just thinking about how that would be coordinated to make sure that we're getting the most, I mean, we want to get the most ears into our community so we can hear what they're having to say, and be productive with that.
To add to that, two things is, one, employees are a large part of our community, obviously, and a very important part of our community. So while I'm very appreciative that you reached out, and Amy and I went and met with the NSEA and NSBeth, and that was good. But I did have an uncomfortability to a certain extent, and Amy and I talked about this, with, I think we need to, you know, who's our community? So it's really great to reach out to the employee groups, but also our PTSA president, and I don't know that a letter was sent to them, and some of our other community groups, because I think their input is just as valuable. And so I have an uncomfortability with only meeting with employee groups, and I know that's not your intent.
Well,
I know it's not, but that if we can stretch that.
and I think that's what Ken was just saying, let's get moving on that.
Exactly, and then thinking through that broad notion of community, and then who do we formally reach out to? Or do we even just have a superintendent search page that says, if you would like to talk with a board members are like office hours, like PTSA is doing, which I think is a fabulous idea. You know, we would be happy to hear the feedback and to collect that feedback throughout the process. And then that's a way that, you know, we can proactively reach out to everyone we can think of, that we know of, but then also there can be kind of an opt-in. Hey, I'd like to talk with that. And the more we can do it. So maybe one PTA at a particular school really wants to meet. And it's hard for, you know, 20,000 students, 2,000 employees, and 100,000 or more, you know, taxpayers, trying to get those coordinated in a way that's conducive to the level of intimacy, you know, that someone wants to have, and yet to make sure that everyone gets a chance to have the board member. Because I think that's important. We've been talking, the 22nd is part of our outreach, or no?
Well, yeah, that's next on the
Okay.
agenda to talk about, is
Okay,
exactly
but I think,
how that
right, and
should
at that
be
point,
done,
for us, maybe that's the more appropriate time, but I think that notion of being efficient but being available is really important for us in scheduling our ability as a board to get the feedback from all the communities. So I don't know that that's an action item, other than just.
Well, no, I mean, I think it's definitely, you know, we've held off on the process discussion quite a bit until we get the proposals from the search firms in terms of deciding exactly, you know, formal processes for getting community outreach. But that just doesn't mean we can't start, you know, like some of the bargaining units, you know, starting the conversations on folks. And so I hear a couple different levels of suggestions there, reaching out to organizations that we interact with on a regular basis is pretty simple to set up. But to Ken's point, how do we have the broader community outreach? You know, I think timing of that with the proposals, and I'd be interested in getting Leanna's feedback as well. So the board retreat, I would think would be a perfect time on the 22nd it's kind of all going to come together in terms of the broader process.
But I like what you're saying, that the associations that we are regularly, I think, what I felt uncomfortable with is I think I like what you said, the associations that we're regularly connecting with, maybe that's the route to go initially, and then on the 22nd, we can expand that to our other what are our other community groups?
And I think absolutely, you know, the organizations that, as board members, we are designated liaisons with. I mean, I would think obviously as part of that liaison role with the Schools Foundation or PTSA or whatever, you know, being able to be available and answering questions, I think that's pretty much.
But I mean, you did it more formally with an email, so I'm wondering if you send out the first email.
I'd be very happy to do that
That's what if we're going to do it formally with one group, I think that we should do it formally with all of our groups. But I do agree, like CPAC and North Shore School Foundations. Sandy, do you have feedback on that?
I can do that. And then we'll have the more detailed discussion on the 22nd. How's that?
And then by the 22nd, maybe we'll have feedback from all these different groups. I don't mean feedback, but we'll have had conversations with, and then maybe the person that is the liaison, you can CC them on, because you can CC one other board member, you and the other board member and I.
Sounds good. All right, we'll get going on that.
I guess just to keep thinking out loud, and I normally shouldn't do it in public, but here we go. We want to separate, we've got two different roles here. One, we are an employer and we are looking to hire a boss for 2,000 employees. So that is one set of nervousness. And then there is, we are looking to hire a superintendent for a community, and that is also a component. So I think what Amy was addressing was that employer component with the emails. And I just want to be absolutely, and I have been very clear that I want to make sure that we have time for a very robust community engagement. I think that this is an opportunity to really find a visionary leader, and we've got some very big changes beyond greater reconfiguration and building a new high school that will be coming at us in the next 10 years. So, but I want to make sure that we have that opportunity to have a conversation of who is our community and who are we connecting with, and not kind of do a snap decision of who that is right now, and then risk missing somebody that is offended or insulted or unhappy that we've left them out. So I think maybe the community component of the superintendent search, that on the 22nd, that's part of our conversation. Who is that, and who are we making sure that we're connecting with?
And in the meantime, can they connect with just our associations, like the PTSA and CPAC and
Things that we liaison with?
yeah, that's what we were saying. The things that were already, and many of those people are part of our school district at that level and on the ground anyway. Just our liaisons. So you did a
Yeah,
beautiful
number 3,
job.
no, he has one more.
I have 3 and then a substantive one, as if these aren't substantive, but just the question came into my mind about evaluation and the notion of evaluation, and when we design programs or review programs. And so when I was in the faculty at the Evans School at University of Washington, we did program design and program evaluation and policy analysis, and those are all kind of orbits that are sort of unique professional areas. But the American Evaluation Association is one group that talks about, what are you trying to accomplish, how do you measure it, and then how do you do an analysis of that. Whereas auditing, which is more my field, you do much more routine, you know what it is, whereas evaluation, you really broadly think about what are you trying to accomplish. And that notion of, especially as we think about some of the bigger program changes, like Later Start and the middle school academic, which are ones that have a lot of concerns and challenges and opportunities with, begin with the end in mind, that notion of how do we evaluate and what's our routine process. And when you design a program, and the grantors, a lot of them have gotten into this and actually put money in the grant for evaluation. So here's what you say you're going to do. Hey, how are we going to measure what you're going to do, and at what points are we going to measure you do, and then when do we know? So just this notion of evaluation in the district in general is kind of the thought bubble, but then as we think about some of our bigger program kind of designs that we want them to be successful, we'll design them with success in mind, but how do we kind of touch on that? And I think as we went through middle school task force, that's one of the ones, the academic piece of that. Drew, what is working well for us, and how do we know? And then when whatever we design and put our weight behind and dedicate ourselves to, how will we be able to evaluate that? So I think it's just this general question of evaluation. Do we use American evaluation? Is there a different, and that's more about like public policy. Is there an education evaluation association? And so it's just a thought bubble.
So help me write on my to-do list what I do.
I think the
Or
superintendent was going to respond, because it's a question of that generic. Sure.
And I would say that there are districts, and we are probably not as strong as we could be with an internal program evaluation capability. I mean, we have some capability primarily through Brandon and his office to do data analysis, but I think your point about what are you looking for on the front end is very well taken, or else you just are kind of fishing around on the back end looking for anything and trying to make sense out of what it may mean. There are program evaluations that you can likely contract out with either higher ed institutions. We've got great ones in our region. Potentially OSPI, although they're pretty tapped resource-wise. I don't necessarily see them as a good partner in that. But there are organizations like the Burke Group. There's organizations like the Center for Educational Effectiveness. So there are players in that arena who can do those kinds of external program evaluations. But I think it's defining what you're looking for.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, and it's more that's, I can't remember who, one of the public comments, someone brought it up, it was that notion of evaluation. And just as we continue, holistically thinking of vision or goals, that somehow that word evaluation, or using evaluation in the planning and the delivery, something like that. And it's a subtle thing, but but organizations that do that, I think, you're thinking the productivity or the results of it. Thanks.
Do we evaluate, so, the program I can think of right now that's a hot topic is Challenge, and then, I don't know, High Cap, I guess, and AAP, and I'm trying to think of programs that we have, PACE. Do we evaluate any of those, like per se, specifically those programs for looking at outcomes, and other programs I'm probably not thinking of at the top of my head right now?
There are, particularly the categorical driven programs at either the state or federal level, there are all kinds of reports, all kinds of data that we have to churn and submit. Special ed, highly capable, AAP, not necessarily specifically, but we have to report on our services regarding highly capable students and our outcomes regarding highly capable students. Special ed has tons of performance evaluation metrics that we're measured against every year. When we have something like the consolidated program review we had just come through the district, they are looking at all kinds of program review metrics, primarily from a compliance standpoint, for the most part. I think I don't want to put words in Ken's mouth, but I think what I'm hearing you say is you want to look at it from a program efficacy standpoint. Not just that we're following all the right rules, but are we seeing the outcomes that we would hope to be seeing from these programs that say we're on the right track.
Right, and it's also kind of that capacity question of, and I think I saw another school district that had like an assistant superintendent of evaluation, and I wasn't sure if that was, AEA, but, so it's more just that question of, as we think about all the things we're doing, how do we do that, and it can be expensive as well.
I just had a related thought bubble, and that's something we've been talking about, is the idea that our performance measures, which, up to this point perhaps has been one of our main as board evaluation tools, that it's been a couple years and they might need redesigning or tweaking. I don't want to say because we haven't decided what, but as we talk about formalizing some outreach, how superintendent search plays into that, and all this thing, adding that evaluation component and performance measures sounds like a pretty great way of tying things together.
Agreed, and I think, having been on many site visits now and seeing this, I think we're in a very reasonable spot in terms of how we're trying to and thinking about evaluation, and then just as we go through those kinds of things, and then even kind of coming up with a shared language. So, so it's more so just there is that component, and especially as we think about the program design.
And that's one question that I'd actually asked last year, which you two weren't on the board, but it was at a board retreat when I was asking, how do we know that the programs that we're putting in place for our struggling learners, how do we figure out the outcomes? And some of that, I remember some of that dialogue was, it's hard to measure it, which I get that. But I think it would be nice, like you said, if we can at some point start implementing and finding ways and to do program evaluation, maybe hiring an outside company to help us at least begin that process with some of our programs to say, are these working? Are they meeting the outcomes? Are they?
You can look at that, and I think there are also some really
You put that in a board meeting, the company?
I think there are also some really good internal examples as well, and I would use our recent school visit to Frank Love, where I think Jonathan and Sonia talked very clearly about particularly their service to their at-risk learners and the programs they've put in place, and then the progress monitoring that they're doing on a regular basis for the students who are in those programs. And I think that's the kind of thing that we probably don't have aggregated at an appropriate level in the district, and we're probably a little more idiosyncratic as far as what each school community is doing. But I think those are the kinds of things that I think are the most impactful, because then they're in the best position to be making those really tactical, on-the-fly adjustments to those programs if they're not seeing the kinds of gains they would hope to see with their ongoing progress monitoring and forming that.
Right, and one of the problems that I have, not being an evaluator, having the choice to go into that field, is when you get the aha, oh, here's a better way to do it. You basically change the structure, and for an evaluator, that's really the problem, because no, I was gonna design it and deliver it this way, and so when you're in that active learning phase, I think you want to do it like they're doing it, and so I think that's, but when you have certain metrics, then you can kind of see that the evaluation oftentimes is a longer report at the end, looking at a big broad scope, and I'm not saying we should do, I'm not sure what we should do more of in that, but just it's at the top to think about, especially a program design. Yeah. Yeah, I think we're mostly on the same page.
And just when there are programs that we're either ending or wanting to put in, like, let's say Saber Challenge or Later Stars, I think we might be able to give justification better either way, right, if we've taken the time up. There could be other programs that,
Planning for the long term.
kind of planning for the long term and being able to go, are these working, are they?
And there's still always going to be an interpretive,
Yeah.
subjective element to that program, and I think, challenge would be a good one. I mean, we've seen gains in students take 8th grade algebra. We've seen gains across the board in all demographic groups of students taking 8th grade algebra. And we've seen the gap between our traditionally overperforming groups and underperforming groups grow in that process. So depending on which side of that coin you want to land on, it's been successful or it hasn't. I think both sides could have validity in that conversation.
And I agree, you can interpret statistics any way you want to interpret them, that's for sure. But we didn't specifically design an evaluative, we don't have an evaluative research process to look specifically at the challenge model, let's say, and then measure that with the outcomes. So we're extrapolating a lot of different.
I'm looking at the time.
See, I was just gonna do
And we
that.
have a
And I
really
still have new
big-
business, by the way.
I was gonna say, we still got a really big important
Yeah, I
study
was gonna
session that I
table
think
this
we all wanna
conversation.
be very fresh and
I
good
have two
thinking of.
myself. Okay, no, you go first. I'll wrap up mine.
So I'm going to do mine because mine are probably the hard ones and controversial ones and, not wanting to bring this up and we're running out of time, but, I feel I need to. So the Facebook. Okay. That's why I asked for the information. I was trying to be, respectful of the process. But in the meantime, the information is now out there with our public that, screenshots, I don't need to reiterate it all, but screenshots are being taken, sent around to employees, and I have seen some of those myself, and that's why I asked for the procedures, and the policy, it's 2022, and the policy, let me find it here. Here it is. I didn't look up the policy yet, but so under responsible use, it says access to technology is a privilege, not a right, and as such, all users must seriously consider the responsibilities associated with the opportunity to use technology devoted to activities that support teaching and learning. The norms of behaviors with regard to responsible use of technology are defined as digital citizenship. It is the responsibility of both NSD staff and parents, and as the board has discussed in the board protocols, the responsibility of the board to be members and citizens of a digital society. And so with that, I'm wanting to have a deeper discussion about, and maybe this is 2 weeks down the road, 4 weeks down the road, about how we are engaging our community in that way as staff. What does our policy say? Do we need to change it? Do we need to make it different? I know that I was friended by this same employee's pseudo life, I don't know. And I had accepted it because the name was a common name, and I actually have another friend in the North Shore School District who has that same name. So I feel violated by that too. That was on my personal Facebook page. And I had no idea that that was the actual employee. So, and I don't think, what I don't want to do here, what I want to be very clear is that employee, I don't think that, I think it's much broader, and I don't want to in any way point a finger at that employee, because I think it was supported more globally amongst the administration and the staff to be able to go on for as many months as it did. So I'm concerned about it. I feel like my own personal space was violated by it, and it's been brought up here, and I would like to continue the discussion, specifically how are we engaging our community as staff, what are those protocols, what's the policy, and I think it needs to be addressed or it will blow up even further, would be my kind of guess, like some things I did last year.
So, over the last couple days, going through this in detail, and churning over it, and like you said, we had as a board a lot of discussions about how to operate as a group, how to interact, especially in times of much change and stress, and I think that kind of conversation was very helpful for us. And then I had a little light bulb moment this afternoon, about 1:40, when I remembered that Sandy, and I dug through my email, it was August of 2015, suggested that we take a look at something that other districts do, including Riverview, and I printed out the example she had sent around of a civility policy. So the civility policy, what it does is it talks about, kind of how we had a discussion as a board in terms of how you interact with each other. It talks about specifically the board and staff and parents and students, and kind of being formal about establishing those kind of norms. And so it occurred to me again at 1:40 that it might be a good way of talking about how to create common understandings amongst people in terms of how to communicate, again, sharing of information, interacting with each other, and having a really in-depth conversation where all parties are equally responsible, which I think helps too in times of stress as well. I know I found that helpful. So I'm happy to, again, resurrect that email from Sandy in 2015. At the time, for Ken and David's benefit, we had a lot. It was when we were revamping the superintendent evaluation process. We had a lot to chew on already. So as a board, we put it aside for a second. But we could definitely put it in a board briefing and maybe perhaps think of it as a way of talking about those questions.
Yeah, I think that is a good thing. I think we're asking our students to behave one way, specifically to digital citizenship, and we need to clarify it. It's a very tenuous, growing, gray and not gray area, because to me this wasn't gray, but there are shades of gray in that. And at the same time, I would like to still have our protocols as a part of it, as a part of that discussion.
Our protocols, or you mean this
I'm
policy
sorry,
you were talking about?
Yeah, I
Okay,
said
cool.
protocols. The procedure, and I do appreciate that, because I think it is about civility. I think this is a little bit beyond that too, but it is about that whole, how do we norm things so that we understand where we're not being civil. Buddy, did you know that paper? Okay, I'll stop there.
So at a minimum, we can take that Riverview policy, and I can ask Tricia Lubach if she's familiar with any other examples across the state, and something, we're about ready to approach the season when we start doing board self-evaluation, board goals and all, and personally this sounds like a great topic to rope into that process.
And I am going to say this, and I'm going to be blunt about it. I expect from admin, staff, cabinet, the same respect on social media that they are asking of me and respect of me. And so I expect the same thing that we're talking about up here when we're talking about our road protocols. And so I'm just asking that we all do respect that, because I very much respect what I've agreed to and my agreement with everybody out there. So just, I have one more question for you, Larry. What is this annual all staff must sign a responsible use and internet safety agreement or take an online responsible use and internet safety course? Is that just about, like, it says it in the procedures that you sent me. And it says annually, all staff must sign a responsible use and internet safety agreement or take an online responsible use and internet safety course prior to using the network.
So 2022P is the acceptable use document, and so do they sign every year, Carolyn? So every year, so that'd be like a beginning of year checklist kind of thing, so all staff would have to sign that they've reviewed the document. They have scads of documents that they're required to review every year, mandatory reporting, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Can you put that in our next board briefing with the policy, what that is? I just want to see what it is. I don't think it was in this, so I think that can be part of the.
Any other topics?
Yeah, one more, but I'm going to, you know what, I'll save it for the next time.
Sandy, David, anything else before?
Before we leave the one that Kimberly, she had talked about the discussion group. What was the action or the next steps for that?
I can say what I put down. So I'm going to get copies of the review civility policy. We're going to follow up and get that form that the employees sign off on. If we need to, maybe we'll reference the number of the policy and procedure that Kimberly's talking about as in 2022P. And then just to, I don't have a date of a meeting to talk about it yet, but we'll get the information out. Like I said, I'm going to talk to Tricia and see if there's any other civility policies that we can talk about, and we'll
Ask about the ones that might include social media on that too.
Okay. Does that match with your recollection or needs?
If the question or the comment that Vice President D'Angelo brought up is that the issue is not about an employee, but it's about a culture, I think my question is, and the more people were involved in this, the question is how do we as the board, do we have an action step on that? And maybe just, we're getting started on it and just identifying that and thinking about it for next time. But I think that's, I just want to make sure that it's not just something that happened, because the community members who came and spoke were very clear, and knowing what happened last year when the community member came and it wasn't really addressed at a significant level, and then the room was full for a couple more meetings. And so I want to make sure that we have responded to this in the nature and the significance and the depth that the community has brought to us.
So if you like, like I said, this afternoon I printed out for my own reference the review document, so you can see it. It does, I just grabbed the procedure really quick. These procedures are meant to underscore the expectation of civil conduct in all interactions within the school district. Provide all individuals the tool and knowledge to eliminate uncivil conduct and replace uncivil conduct with acceptable, productive interactions. So this, I figured it was just an idea that popped into my head to start.
And so just get, so they said that that's on the discussion item for the next time, and that's not being directed. I wasn't sure if that was talking about civility among the board or if this is civility within the organization.
It's definitely the greater
all
org.
of the above.
Okay, thank you.
But what I feel comfortable with is we went over our protocols, so I'm more concerned at this point. I agree that applies to all of us, but I think that's part of what I'm struggling with is we haven't discussed, like you said, civility that applies to not just the board, but and we do have our procedures outlined here that say how students are to be digital citizens. So, and I do agree with Kim. I think I brought that up at the beginning of this, that this does concern me, that this would escalate and snowball and that we would end up with a situation because we didn't address it next year. So I appreciate you saying that, because that's what I was trying to say, and I was trying to gently,
And
you
you
know,
feel,
not-
that that the course of action is adequate to show that the board is working on it?
yes, I think everyone here takes this seriously, and we're going to address it.
Right, and this was, and this may not be the perfect tool, for lack of a better word, to start the conversations. I mean, I think, and the reason why we stepped away from this in 2005, it involves discussions with a lot of different people, a lot of different groups, really, to make it work. And so that's why the time constraint was a concern the last time. So, but at least in terms of having the board look at it, see if it is coming close to thoughts and concerns the board has, and then we can talk about what we want to move forward with.
Just like racial equity, though, that I just want to make sure we hit the social media piece in that doesn't, we don't lose that in the discussion.
Well, yeah, and that would be like a perfect point to talk about, what level of, there's the policy, the procedure, what level of detail, and it does specifically call out, like I said, the board, employees, parents, and students. So the idea is that it involves the whole system.
Thank you, that's good clarification.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in the interest of time here, but if you have anything else, let me know if I've jumped ahead. There is on your dais, we don't really have notes on the agenda, so just for your information, Cindy has, provided for us information about another racial equity training in the end of April. This is part 3 of a series. I went to number 2, and with our training, the conference we're going to in May, I know I personally am not going to be attending this one, but just wanted to let you know it's there. Another thing I wanted to...
Thank you.
Another thing, I know Cindy, not Cindy, but Cindy. But another thing too is, officially this time of year, we'll be talking about getting superintendent evaluation started up. And so in the coordination meeting, Ken and I discussed this with Larry, and he expressed a willingness to pass on it this year. But I wanted to formally bring that up as a topic. We will be having plenty of reasons to get together with search, and we will still go through our own board self-evaluation. There's a tool with Losta that's worked really well for us, and having goal-setting conversations as a board, but just letting that know, he communicated that willingness, and so unless there's objections, we'll go ahead and roll forward with that. I think we could use that time in the search for sure. Lastly, from my notes, there was a list during the coordination meeting. Larry, I'll let you take this in a second if you like, but I'll sum it up for a second. He called it his biggies to wrap up. And this was something we talked about just discussing here on the dais, but this is related to the initiatives and new business request list. But Larry specifically identified the areas of focus for himself before the end of June. And so grade reconfiguration work, those task forces, the EDTF work around the Maltby property. We have bargaining, and I can get this list out to folks, and Larry can elaborate if needed. We have the Start Time Task Force, narrowing it to options. We still have equity, part of our board retreat, which we'll talk about in a second. It's going to talk about the focus group results. There's still questions amongst the elementary grade reconfiguration task force about elementary bounded orchestra. So he did he did enunciate a list of his biggies to wrap up.
And just for clarity, we discussed at cabinet yesterday, and the list is slightly longer than what we talked about. But what it is for me is if these items could all be sort of checked off by the end of June, I think that would be a positive for the district. I think it would be a positive for a new superintendent coming in to have these items sort of at a place of resolution, even though most of them continue into next year, but changing them from sort of decisions to more implementation, from the what to the how.
And I think in addition to the old business, I think that list would be useful for the board to see every other week and just to get the quick update on that. And I think most of them,
That's a good idea.
right.
We
So-
can add it to the initiatives.
I'll update it and put it in the briefing, and
Yeah,
we'll put it in the.
and very appreciate that you did that.
Under the superintendent, you said that we're gonna have a section for superintendent on each meeting, under new business.
Well, for the search, yeah, for
Yeah,
the
it's
search,
old
or we can put it
business.
under our initiatives.
Update on superintendent search, update on, I mean, it's almost like a punch list, right? You're trying to figure out, just the updates on those 2 items.
Critical, yeah,
Right.
critical.
They may or may not be special.
So that's my list of new business topics. Anyone have anything else before we move on?
Okay, something to decide for my new business,
We
good.
take all the.
I stole her idea from a year and a half ago,
Yes,
so
that
wasn't
was
quite
great,
good.
I'm thrilled to have that come back,
Um,
that's fabulous, thank you.
Okay, so then I'd like to move on to the next item, which is the agenda for the board retreat. So I just want to go over this, when, again, during the coordination meeting, we were touching base on this a little bit, and this is kind of how it's panning out. That, again, this is dependent on how many proposals we receive from search firms, but we've allocated 2 hours to review those proposals. We've allocated an hour to go over the Education Northwest Focus Group data and their findings, analysis of their findings, and then an hour to start the conversation of community engagement, because obviously we weren't going to get very, that was going to be the meat of the meeting, but we have prioritized, of course, the superintendent search. So the idea being, if we don't get as many proposals to review, we have, the first item on the community engagement agenda was an overview of the existing framework. So we're going to start with that, and if we want to keep going through the agenda, we always could. So this is how it's looking right now, just looking to have any feedback or comments, concerns.
Why don't we extend the time to this date? Because it sounds like we're gonna have a lot to discuss, so I feel like the 4 hours might not be enough. So we were talking about all these different times that we could get together, and I'm thinking, why don't we extend this time? Since we're already here talking about that, and I feel like it's 6:44, we started talking. I feel like we could go longer than that. And it sounds like there's gonna be a lot of different tenants, and I wanna make sure, based on what you're bringing up, that we get as much of it done at that time. So when we leave, we're feeling like we know where we're going. We can't take action there, but we kind of have a framework.
Right now, we have it scheduled to start at 2, so moving it back
Can we
to
do it
1.
earlier?
I can do 1:30.
Do 1:30?
Okay.
And correction, the business meeting starts at 7.
Yes.
I'm sure we won't start much earlier than 2. Especially.
Could you do 1:30?
Oh, I can do 1:30.
Okay.
Right.
So, and I'd like to offer up the suggestion, if we need to, at that meeting, decide to take items number 2 and 3 off the agenda and move them to another time, we could always do that.
Just to clarify, as a special meeting, you can actually take action on any item that's listed on the agenda. So if superintendent search is on the agenda, you can take action at that time on anything related to superintendent search or whatever else might be.
That retreat is a special meeting.
Yes.
We just call it retreat because it's usually long.
Everything, the study session is a special meeting. So, I mean, technically, you could take action in a study session on, we traditionally don't, we use them as learning opportunities, but you could take action on, but only on the agenda item that's listed for the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to clarify number 1, Amy, that's included in that 2 hours is decision as to whether to go with an interim or a permanent.
Yes, so, and I have that down in my notes to clarify the agenda. So if, I would agree that it probably will take more than 2 hours.
I just personally think we need to have that decision made by the 22nd, whether we're going with an interim or permanent.
And then whether the interim will use the process, RFP process, or this other process we're going to discover.
All right, any other questions about retreat agenda? This is me moving. So let's go on to the next item, member reports. So David, would you like to kick us off?
In the interest of time, can I submit mine to Cindy via email, please?
That is a
Can you do that?
welcome idea. Sandy?
I have cool stuff, I'm not neglecting all the cool stuff.
No. You don't do new business, you get to do this.
I get to do cool stuff. So I attended 4 career days, Timbercrest, Leota, North Shore Junior High, and Canyon Park. And this was a dream 5 years ago, and I just would like to thank all of the people that have done this. PTAs, Damon is a godsend, the staff that put countless hours into these, they really do make a difference in kids' lives. I was just, Kenmore Eric has come to North Shore Junior High for all 5 years, and I was just talking to a kiddo that first year was his 9th grade year, was the first year that we had it, and he's now in pilot school. So it does make a difference, and they are, granted the morticians were a huge hit this year, but they're just great events and wonderful opportunities for kids to start thinking about next steps. And I know that it's challenging district-wide because it's always the week before registration, and that's purposely done so kids are thinking about what classes they're taking next year. But I just want to thank all of the schools for doing this and putting the effort into it. Also attended kindergarten orientation last week, and went very well. We certainly had lots of nervousness about where parent angst was, but actually it was great. They were very enthusiastic and supportive, and certainly questions about when they're going to know things, but not as much anger as I think we were anticipating. So lovely job, great representation from our principals, staff, PTA, and so forth. And then I attended the Boundary Open House last Wednesday at Inglemore. Yes, and there were probably more of us than there was community, but again, good questions and people there getting a sense of what's happening in a year and a half. So again, thank you to all the staff that put hard work in putting those together.
Okay, Ken?
I listened to a lot of community members, and I'm starting to read this book that was left on our table the last time.
Isn't it good?
It's really good,
It is
and we'll
really
talk about it
good.
shortly.
Great. Kimberly?
Engaged with many community members, and then went with Amy to the NSD. You know, I can never remember. 2 weeks is so long. I feel like we do so much in 2 weeks.
Right, and then the only one I have to add is I got to present at Career Day, which, Sandy really deserves a lot of praise for her support of it and helping it spread throughout the district over the years, because it's my 3rd time presenting to kids, and I can't say how rewarding it is. It's wonderful. And then I'm going to steal a little bit of my board reports, because there's one more thing I wanted to talk to you guys about. So we actually got an unsolicited contact from a superintendent search firm that was not on our list, and information about the superintendent search process. So I'm going to tally these, because we already sent it out, and I don't want to, well, unless we want to talk about it later. This wasn't on our agenda to talk about. I just want to let you know that we are getting contacts, and we get a huge, more than just this one. I'll let you know how's that sound.
So part of that's
So they found out about, probably through our press release or something. They're based in Chicago.
they gave this us.
No, we didn't know about them before they contacted us, so good. Do we want to, is it early enough in the process? Do we want to ask Cindy to send an RFP out to these guys?
Yes.
All right,
More information.
all right, then we will do that. So then, I will,
They sent you a book.
I know, that was fun. I'd like to adjourn this meeting. Immediately following the regular meeting, the board will hold a study session in room 101 to receive an update on the middle school academic subcommittee. Grade reconfiguration.